Hey everybody. This is Nevin Gusak, your host of the Populist Patriot. Tonight we were supposed to have a guest, but unfortunately the guest wasn't able to join us due to a family emergency. So I'm going to be doing some live streams this evening based on some newspapers, history that I've been kind of going through and reading about. Um, Came across this study dated from December of 2020 titled The Rise of Democratic Socialists of America, a qualitative analysis of the contributing factors to insurgent mobilization. And this was written by Grady Lowry of the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And it was obviously a PhD thesis, a graduate thesis. And I found some interesting quotes in the introduction that really caught my eye. And this kind of feeds into what I was talking about in my declaration of war against the social Darwinists, economic types who believe in total free markets and busting unions and calling workers lazy and worthless if they're not being paid enough or irresponsible with the money. You know, those type that like to shit on poor people and working class people for being a bunch of lazy shits. Those types. That was my declaration of war. And I illustrated very clearly how they contribute to the growth and the appeal of socialism and other left-wing or collectivist extremist doctrines within the younger American populace in particular. And what's interesting here is a couple of quotes here in chapter 1 of the introduction of this thesis. The Democratic Socialists of America emerged as a social movement organization in the 1980s as a response to corporate domination during the Reagan-Thatcher era, meaning the neoliberal, globalist, anti-labor period in the country. And let's see. And in this study, he analyzed DSA's digital content, podcasts, articles from its periodical Democratic Left, and also attending DSA meetings and events in Knoxville, Tennessee, and also talked to 46 DSA members on why they entered the DSA. And it talked about, of course, how the Reagan era contributed to the growth of the DSA, and it showed how DSA today has over 70,000 members all across the United States. So that was rather interesting. It was an interesting point of view, and at least twice in this dissertation, like one of the quotes that I read, the DSA actually grew. It started out as the Democratic Socialists Organizing Committee formed by Michael Harrington, and the more hardcore leftists that left parts of SDS, as well as the Socialist Party in the United States. And they were very anti-Cold War. They tended to be very lenient towards Soviet aggression throughout the world. They were pro-Sandinista. They hailed, of course, the Gorbachev dictatorship as, quote, allegedly a reformist form of socialism. They tended to lean more against American foreign policy and efforts to defend ourselves against the Soviet Union and other allies of Russia at the time during the 1980s. And they were, very, very heavy state intervention in the American economy, much more than what we would prescribe here at the Populist Patriot. And when we talk about 70,000 members in now Democratic Socialists of America, DSOC, the Democratic Socialist Organizing Committee, became the Democratic Socialists of America during the 1980s. And when we're talking about 70,000 members, that's a serious number. And DSA already has plans to take over the Democratic Party. That is their intentions, to strongly influence it and take it over, like some successful cases, I believe, in Nevada, for example. There are plans to take over the Democratic Party in Texas to make a red state red, if you will. A red Republican state, meaning red Marxist. So DSA, 70,000 members, and I can't get out of my head the assertions of sociologists and historians like Daniel Bell, for example, who claim that really by 1960, the appeal of domestic communist groups in the United States decreased because we abolished laissez faire liberal capitalism. We were able to control the business cycle. We were able to try and really tamp down the amount and severity of recessions and depressions. And as a result, that created a more economically stable society. The nation was progressing forward. So why would people be interested in joining any revolutionary party, whether a Nazi, neo-Nazi party or a communist party? And the Communist Party of the United States, although Soviet funded at the time, it experienced a decrease in membership because of the crimes committed against the people in Hungary in the aftermath of Stalin. You had a situation with where the Communist Party of the United States started to look for other sources of fissures in the United States and divisions, like on the racial and gender front, and they chose to exploit the causes of civil rights and women's rights in the United States to promote the decomposition of the United States. But it was very difficult for the Communist Party USA by the 1950s to really exploit economic dislocations in the United States, because things overall were economically improving, even for our African American brothers and sisters, as the 1950s and especially the 1960s progressed. You had the continued development of a real black middle class. You had the continued development of independent black business community, the black bourgeoisie. So there was really the reason for the economic appeal for communism or the neo-Nazis in the United States were very slight. And that's something that Daniel Bell and other intellectuals had noted at the time. However, when Ronald Reagan started to ruin the American economy for the great masses of people, you started to slowly have a comeback, which continued during the decades of the 1990s and especially now in recent years in the 2000s, where you have the appeal of the extreme left in regards to membership rolls really increasing. The Communist Party USA is reported, as I mentioned in one of my previous podcasts, my declaration of war video. Communist Party USA is having some increases in membership, but groups like the Trotskyite Communist Socialist Alternative, the Party of Socialism and Liberation, which is another communist party, and then you have the Democratic Socialists of America, which is becoming much more openly far left in recent years, and now, according to this thesis, data from 2020, Democratic Socialist America has 70,000. I mean, the only time that we've had this high of a number of American left extremist parties in membership numbers is during the Great Depression, from about roughly 1929 until well into the 1930s. And because capitalism was failing in the United States, unregulated or poorly regulated capitalism and financialization, which was encouraged in the 1920s under the Harding and Coolidge and Hoover administrations, that really kind of wrecked the economy and led us in part to a depression, arguably. And of course, when that happens, you're going to have anti-capitalist extremists of the left, as well as the sort of third position variety, National Socialist or fascist groups that were pro-Axis, pro-Third Reich. During the 1930s, you started to have the appeal of those groups, and they grew in number, as well as demagogic forms of authoritarian populism growing in the country. And it's a natural result of a failed political system and a failing economic system. And fortunately, Franklin Roosevelt enacted certain programs and laws with the Congress, a cooperative Congress, that really allowed America really to learn from its mistakes with the over-financialization of the economy, and also put in certain programs that were really needed, like Social Security, like legalizing the right to organize and collectively bargain and things of that nature. And now we're going to need a New Deal on steroids in this country. And once, in my opinion, we have New Deal style corrections to capitalism, and we codify it in our Constitution, the Second Bill of Rights, if you want to call it as such, you're going to have the appeal of communist and Marxist groups lower. like you'll find the DSA membership lowering, I would argue, because people are not going to want to necessarily join revolutionary parties. They're going to see that the American dream is working for them. So I think this is a really good admission where, again, chapter 1 in this introduction of this thesis by Grady Lowery of the University of Texas, Knoxville, where he said the Democratic Socialists of America emerged as a social movement organization in the 1980s as a response to corporate domination during the Reagan-Thatcher years. There you go. There you go. Another penny in the jar. Shows that Reaganism, the whole Tea Party, anti-labor, globalist, pro-corporate, quasi-libertarian or neoliberal economics and its, in its political policies are a failure, and that it creates more communists, actually. It antagonizes people within the nation, causes more class divisions, and leads to the growth of left-wing extremism in the United States. So I figured I'd share this piece of news, and this is going to be part of my declaration of war against the corporate right and the Reaganist right, as well as, of course, the extremes of the left and National Socialist and neo-fascist groups, as well as our geopolitical enemies. This station, we're declaring war. We're going to highlight heroes like what we've done in the business and labor communities, as well as also highlight positive policies that are done on the state level and the federal level whenever they come up. Thank you all for listening to the program. I see at least somebody listening to the program, wherever you are. Thank you for listening. More to come tonight.